It is really cool to be here again, because 2 years ago we had the launch conference of the DUT, and I had the pleasure of moderating a session back then with the Vice Mayor of Antwerp, with representatives of Alba Iulia in Romania, and colleagues from ERIN and ICLEI. And so the topic of this panel discussion was urban transitions in and for uncertain times, human-made and Anthropocene challenges for cities. So what are the effects this climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and socioeconomic crisis we are living in has? What are the effects for our cities? And if I was to summarize that very good discussion back then into one sentence, I would say our cities have emerged as the arenas where the futures of our societies are determined. It's a big statement right there. So I'm very happy that we have the chance today to have the sequel of that session, part 2, if you will, and take that further to not only discuss or exchange about the challenges on the cities, but also what is there, what is the creativity which also drives the change. So I think we all agree here today that there is a very big urgency to change, to the human-made crisis. But the question remains, who is driving the change? What is driving the change? For whom is this change? And the opinions on that vary, right? So some will say research policy, others will say innovation, others will say urban policy, others will say grassroots initiatives, the urban doers who are here today. And of course, all of that is true. And all of that contributes to that. And when I quote the Commission's president who opened the New European Bauhaus Festival yesterday with the words, "The possibilities are endless, limited only by our imagination." Of course, that is absolutely true. But I would like to go a bit deeper in that and say that there's one factor which is very often overlooked in this change. And that is what this change does to us humans. What does this change trigger in terms of emotions, in terms of feelings, in terms of fear maybe? And from neuroscience, we actually know that, change, uncertainty triggers the same parts in our brain as stress, threat, grief, loss. So our brain is somehow hardwired to resist this change. And we need to somehow take it up. Change triggers these same areas. And when you think about it, a person who opposes very strongly that there's 2 parking lots taken away in their road, they actually, there's uncertainty. The brain tells us that the stability is disrupted. There's something happening to the stability. And this mechanism is very useful when you look back, because back then, when we were, not so urbanized, let's say, shelter and food meant survival. And the disruption to that meant a threat. The good news is that this is very predictable, right? So we can do something with it. We can work with that. This is very, very clear. And I recently read a lot on these issues. And one graphic I came across was this. It's not a new one. It's not rocket science. It's 30 years old. It's the transition curve. So the emotional, the human side of change. What does it do to our humans? And what this curve basically tells or is about, it's about describing the journey of an individual or of a group of people through change. And it's more or less, the beauty of this graphic is that it applies to you if you need to change apartments or jobs, you might go through these quarters. Or if you have a super huge urban development project, a group of people might also go through it. Let's have a very brief look at it, because we have a very good panel today. So the denying phase is, people think the perception is no change is needed. We go on, business as usual. This will blow over. And the leadership action is like to disrupt and say, hey, change is coming. We cannot escape. Something is happening here. You need to be prepared. And the resisting phase is actually the very choosy one. This is where the opposition comes, where people do not want this change. They don't want this disruption. They express their feelings very strongly. And that is okay, because the leadership action for leading the change is to listen. You don't need to solve all their problems. Don't do that, because the project will fail if you do. But just listen. And then we go into this quarters of opportunity, which is exploring. This is where the creativity comes out, where everybody has ideas, where we co-create, where we experiment with new ways of doing it. The leadership action there is to bring this creativity on a certain pathway, to focus it on what we are actually doing there. And the last one is about the acknowledgement. So that is we have a new status quo and we need to celebrate it. So we have come out on the other side all right. Because it is very important that people are taken by the hand and be assured, hey, there's a disruption happening, but we will be okay when we come out on the other side. And maybe the future is even better than the one we are living in now. But who am I actually talking to you about change? Because we have a full room of change makers, leaders, people working in different aspects of that here. And people pushing really the envelope for changing governance and policy, from EU level to local level. We have the urban doers who work very locally on a very local neighborhood scale. And we even have people who lead by example. We have one person who biked parts 500 kilometers from Vienna to Antwerp. Francesca, where are you? Over there. So if you want to talk about biking, talk to Francesca. Yes. I'm happy you didn't get a flat tire on the way, and you made it actually here. Anyway, so I'm very happy to finally invite the panelists of this session. We have Sophia, please give them a warm applause. Silverton from ICLEI Europe in Freiburg. We have Tim Taylor from Thriving Communities in Maribor. We have Gerfried Ambrosch, who is a grassroots environmentalist from Munich. And we have Sampo Ruoppila from the Turku Urban Research Program. Welcome. Yeah. Nice to have you finally here because we discussed quite a lot, right, to prepare this session. You know, we often with this is only a very short session and people have a lot of things to say. So what I figured, it's very hard for people, for the audience usually, to paint a picture of what people are actually doing. You know, they say something inspiring, but what is the habitat where people are working in? So I asked the people, the panelists, to send me 1 or 2 pictures of the natural work environment and how they lead change, how they contribute to change. So Sophia, let's start with you. What is this habitat you're thriving in here?
Hello, everyone. So for the past couple of years, I have worked closely together with many different community-led initiatives and local governments who are trying to make their cities more sustainable and more just. And you can see an example of one of such groups on the screen here. There is, for example, an unstoppable group of food savers and gardeners in Thessaloniki, Greece, who then redistribute this food and the resources to the people who need it most. And I'll give you €5 if you can find me in that picture. But more specifically, I've been facilitating a rather modest grant scheme for initiatives like this. And then also creating both online and in-person spaces, which you can also see up on the screen now, to bring these groups together, to share their triumphs, to develop a sense of solidarity, and also to share their struggles as well. So in this way, my role in leading change is really that of a connector, of a facilitator, and very often a cheerleader for these groups as well, with which I take quite a lot of joy in doing. In terms of what's come out of this, it's very difficult to measure impact of this sort of role, but I can use maybe a metaphor that one of our initiatives said to me, which was, she pictured her initiative as a plant. The grant money we gave to her was like water for her plant. The compost in which it was growing out of were these spaces for collaboration, for connection. And then finally, this wooden stake, you know, that plants climb up of, these are her new network of peers that make her stronger, and so on.
That's a beautiful metaphor. That's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go to the next. This one is Tim. You might not see Tim here.
1, 2. Oh, you took away the arrow.
No, wait. Here's Tim. Tim is is the one entering the coffee shop.
Very similar to what Sophia said. Morning, everyone. Great, Johannes. Thanks a lot for the invitation. So I'm Tim. I'm originally from New Zealand. I live in Slovenia these days. I've lived and worked across Europe and different parts of the world. And the work I try to do through our little social enterprise, Korimako, and a wider initiative that we're working to build up called Thriving Communities, is really helping change makers and communities with the grand challenges that we're facing. How on earth are we going to create radical enough change that our communities can actually come to thrive now and through the rest of the 21st century? How do we grapple with the fact that we're currently on a pathway, most of us, to sort of this sense of cascading crises, and more change like we have been doing it just isn't going to be good enough. We have to find ways to do things radically better. That's what we try to do. It's of course a lot harder than it is to say, and it's not so easy to say.
And Tim, what do you do on the picture?
And in the picture, similar, I suppose. I mean, here's, in Europe anyway, my role's around supporting change makers. And here we have a group of people at a training on community placemaking for civic imagination. We're on next to the banks of the river in Ljubljana. And I guess my work is around bringing people together, helping to raise ambitions, helping to work together to learn and find ways to tackle those challenges and make sure that we can have some fun in the process. So I'm heading in to get some more specialty coffee from a very nice little coffee shop that I can recommend. So that's the little backstory to the picture. So
sweet.
Yeah, onwards.
Over to you, Gerfried. I have to say, so you're a grassroots environmentalist, right? So you have a PhD actually in literature and cultural studies.
Right, yeah.
So and your habitat is, it seems like your habitat is someone else's habitat, actually.
Well, yeah, habitat is the right word here. So as you can see, my approach is a very hands-on kind of conservationist approach. I work with local groups, municipalities, farmers, to restore wildlife habitats, mostly in Munich and Graz, Austria. So it's sort of like my two main sort of hubs for my biodiversity work. And it's challenging because on the one hand, even small measures, small efforts can have tremendous effects and really prop up populations of frogs, amphibians, which also includes newts and toads and things like that. But on the other hand, funding is very difficult to come by, and most of these efforts rely heavily on volunteer work. I'm a volunteer myself, and it's just groups of people on a very grassroots level getting together and trying to implement change. But as I said, it would be nice to have more money, to have professionals do this kind of work, but that's where we are. And as you can see, I'm not afraid to get dirty. And that's what it takes sometimes.
Yeah, very nice. And you also won a prize from the city, from the region of Styria, right, for your work?
Oh, I did, yes, in 2022. Yeah,
you might be able to touch up on that maybe
sort
for
the biodiversity award. Yeah.
Over to you, Sampo. I like this one very much because you're leading change from the football stadium.
Yeah, sometimes even there. Yeah, true. So I manage a city universities collaboration initiative called Turku Urban Research Program, which incorporates the municipality and two local universities to work together on different kind of urban research topics, all fields, not only sustainable development from ecological perspective, but also other ones, economic, social, cultural, and obviously good governance as well. And these parties fund the research projects together, and this is the way for university researchers to actually challenge the policymakers to think a bit more strategically about what they are actually doing and how to implement change, how to build on things that are happening around us, how to actually grasp on what kind of policies can be actually built to be effective. And yeah, as this typical work of enabler. Like all the others, I could have had a picture from me doing the talking or writing or editing or whatsoever in a typical meeting room or behind my desk. But this is something that COVID brought to us, that we had to organize seminars also outdoors, and this happens in a stadium environment. Although we are talking about housing research and its implications.
Nice. And staying with you, Sampo, how do you enable this change? How do you work with the city, or how is this collaboration enabling the change? What do you do?
Well, as the research, what research does is that the research actually gives you the frameworks to work with. So the research can set an ambition level and also set a criteria towards the world that we should be moving to. So
how do you co-create with them? How do you check in with them, or how?
We have basically like talking, negotiating, facilitating negotiations, or having this kind of steering group meetings where researchers present their views and their stuff, and then there's a dialogue. It's all happens in a dialogue, and that's I think one of the main points I want to emphasize, that there has to be this knowledge of co-creation also in terms of capacity of the municipal sides, or whether NGOs or whomsoever doing the action understanding what they can expect from research and understand the kind of information they can get and the kind of information they can actually implement, because the implementation always takes their work as well, the work of municipalities, the work of NGOs, or the works of whomsoever who is actually leading the change.
All right. Let's see if we have another slide. Yeah, this one I was looking for. Great. Over to you, Gerfried. I know we spoke on the Cities Reimagined podcast recently, and what I really like is how you painted this picture, or how you told me how you work with different people, with different publics as well. You work with the municipalities and different parties also in the municipality to get agreement on doing your kind of work. And I found this extremely inspiring, how you change your approach in terms of how to whom you talk to in order to create an awareness for the need of the stuff you're doing. So tell us a little bit about this importance of connecting people, connecting between parties, political parties, but also involving schools and so on in your practice.
Right. You have to know who you're talking to, and sometimes, as you said, it's politics on sort of at the local level. You have to sort of convince local politicians that maybe if they helped fund the project, it would look good for them. It's something that people care about. It's biodiversity. It's all these, buzzwords you can use. On the other hand, when you talk to, say, farmers, whether or not they'd be willing to give up a small portion of the land to have like a wildlife area there, you have to talk to them on a different level. For instance, especially with country folk. Chances are they grew up there. They remember what biodiversity they were able to enjoy as children, as kids, and you can sort of like get to people on that emotional level very, very easily, because almost everybody has sort of like fond memories of like here in my case, with the amphibians, hearing frogs, and like on a summer night and things like that, and how that could be brought back through certain initiatives. Yeah,
very nice. And it's important to also say that you're not only working in the rural part, but you're working in the suburbs of Graz or in Munich, right? So there is the farmers right there on the fringe of the city. Well,
yeah, Munich is a very good example for that, because and Vienna as well, where I used to live until recently, because there's actually a lot of agricultural land within city limits. So and those areas are usually hubs for biodiversity, and of course, with densification being a big issue, a lot of these spaces are lost at the moment, and that's a shame, because those were refuges for certain species, because their primary habitats out in the countryside have been destroyed long ago through intensive farming and things like that, and now they found these little sanctuaries in the cities, and now those are endangered because of sort of the city pushing outwards and becoming denser.
Yeah. Very nice. We will be at the behind the curtain session later on, so we might have more time to dive into that and also see how urban habitats, or how leftover brownfields, how they can be great spaces for amphibians. Over to you, Tim. So you work with mission-led. How would you describe it? Mission-led community engagement or mission-led community work. Do you perceive that there's a gap currently between the theory and action of mission-led change?
A big question. I mean, as I said, like for us, to the topic of this, who or what is leading change? But as you said, change for who? What kind of change? And if for us, it's starting from, we have to create radical enough change that means that everyone in our communities can live well and in ways that we don't wreck the ecological and planetary systems on which we depend, of which climate is one, but it's only one. And most communities are very far from covering the breadth of all of that, and nor are they going fast enough in a systemic enough way and creating change that really is benefiting everybody. We think mission-led change is a great tool to help communities do that and to reframe from thinking about what can we do next to what must we do. But it's an enormous amount of work and leading, and it requires the kind of work that you're talking about, Gerfried, and every action and leading people through that curve is hard work. And so I do see a very big gap, I think, between the theory of who should be leading that change. And we've heard that, well, municipalities should be leading the climate mission. But actually, in my experience, most municipalities are very far from being organized, from being able to lead mission-led change. And in our communities, there are networks of the people with the mindset, the aptitude, the passion, the commitment that want to lead radical change. But mostly they are kind of scattered, they're underempowered, they're undersupported, they're underfunded, they're very often underpaid.
Yeah.
And they're not coalescing into organizing models that give us critical mass for this radical transformative change. I think if we were more honest about that, we could do a better job of getting those funds and resources. So yeah, the gap between, I think, theory of change and the complexity of these actions is still quite big.
Yeah.
We try and fill that gap with networking and connection, capacity building, but of course, there's a huge gap between our theory of what we would like to change and our current action too, and it's tough. Yeah.
Over to you, Sophia, because you know, ICLEI is a network of municipalities working together on, or you work on sustainability with this with your members, really. But your work is really much from this network, from this European or global organization. It really links to the very local community-led initiatives, which is a very, very interesting point. Why do you do that? Tell us more about it. What is fascinating about that?
Why do we do that? Yeah, so as you mentioned, ICLEI is a network of local governments. This is who we represent. But as you were just saying, Tim, is you can see so much change happening from these super grassroots groups that are pushing the envelope. They're really leading things, and it's so exciting to watch. And so we thought, okay, why don't we go down the path of looking into collaboration between local governments and community-led initiatives as a nexus for change? And this, we think, could create win-win scenarios in which community-led initiatives offer passion, they offer local expertise, they offer access to diverse voices that otherwise would be perhaps left out, also to this more long-term thinking beyond election cycles. But then on the other side of the coin, I guess, you have the local governments who maybe have a bit more muscle to offer some funding, some capacity building, and so on. And so then this process of working together could be very important for building trust and building a common narrative of change together in cities. And in which each group, both the community-led initiatives and the local governments, have something valuable to both offer and gain from the other. And this creates more resilience, it creates more strength. And that's something I'm very excited to be working on a bit further. It does come along with some challenges. I've talked to many of the initiatives that I mentioned in the beginning about the reality of working together across these two types of groups. There's an accessible bureaucracy that can be a hurdle. There can be simply a lack of spaces for this type of collaboration, and sometimes even just competing interests and values between the groups. But when I asked a community leader a couple of weeks ago, why would you do this? Why would you work with your local government? This was someone from the Municipalities in Transition in Italy initiative. And he just said, you have to. There's no way around it. You have to work together and touch all points of organizing society if you want to make some sort of change.
Beautiful. And I think, sorry?
So the change makers often have this, there's a love-hate relationship with institutions.
Yeah, I think
it depends in different contexts, the balance of love and hate.
But I think tomorrow we have an Agora dialogue, and this is focused on that topic, and we can discuss about the frameworks, how to engage not only local urban initiatives better with municipality, but also what that does it require from on a European scale with the programming, and how to not take local initiatives and just try to hammer them into funding frameworks. But what is required to actually have a framework where the two logics meet, I would say. Right, that almost brings us to the end. It's really a pity, but last question to anybody who wants to answer that, and all of you can answer. What is next for you, and what is the next? Where do you see the next focus for leading change? What is coming up? Open question to anybody.
Well, I think from the knowledge producer perspective, is just how to get that knowledge through. So how to actually go on with that kind of knowledge-based collaboration between different kind of institutions, for instance, to perhaps then alleviate that love-hate relationship when organizations become to understand each other better. and get the point of their existence and why they matter and why they think perhaps differently about the character of a change and the needed actions. And this is somewhere where then research also lingers in and can help to actually reorganize that and rethink the whole thing.
Tim, Gerfried.
Well, I could say something very concrete.
Yeah,
which I actually told you before. So next Thursday we're gonna build a new wildlife pond in Graz for the European green toad and the European tree frog. That's going to be a lovely project. It's very concrete, and then I'm going to take school classes there, sort of the following days, and explain and sort of get them while they're young.
So if you're in Graz, you can probably join that group as well, Tim.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'll keep the flow along. I mean, we're going to keep working. I mean, with thriving communities and from the base in Slovenia, really focusing in Southeastern Europe. It's a fantastic part of the world. Lots of opportunities, challenges. But we're really, trying to stitch together those change makers, ideas around how they can more effectively create radical change. But then these questions around organizing models, like how can change makers better organize to serve their communities? And the sort of maybe the fourth leg of that table is the funding and the resources. And this is, to be honest, still where we're really struggling, like to connect the people and the ideas with organizing models that can secure funding that can last long enough and be flexible enough to give this work a proper go. We've tried and continue to try many angles, and we will keep trying. But that's still that gap, I think. Yeah. So, but keep working. That's all we can do.
Sophia.
All right, I'd quickly echo.
You're going to say you're going to go
again,
on holiday, right?
No. I'd echo what you said about having really broader reaching, longer lasting opportunities for supporting the groups doing this sort of work. They're having a hard time, and they can't access a lot of the funding schemes that are better suited for more sophisticated organizations. So this is something that I'm personally going to be working on, is advocacy for these sorts of supports, whatever they may look like. We can talk about it later. I'd be happy to. But maybe one last thing, when I was talking to many of the initiatives I was working with last year at a workshop, I was asking them about systemic change. What can they do to bring about systemic change, or what's important? And they said to me, first of all, to always keep a playful mindset, to not be too focused on the outcome of what you're doing, being open for mistakes, and also to keep caring for each other, because that's really at the heart of why we're doing what we're doing. So care for each other, care for people that you maybe don't know, maybe you'll never meet them, and for non-human life as well.
Thank you so much. We are at the end of the session, and I would like to wrap up. Well, I would not like to wrap up, but I have to wrap up. And it's a bit of an experiment now, but on last weekend, I went for a very long hike in the Austrian Alps. It was a run. It was 20 kilometers, and I went alone, and when you go alone and you have this ascent, so you figure out that, your brain wanders off, and my brain went to this session. I thought, oh, what are the key messages of the speakers? How does it fit into the overall program and so on? And all of a sudden it occurred to me that leading change or leading urban change is like the band Black Sabbath. Yeah, but really, let me explain, because you might know the band, you might like them, it doesn't matter. But you know that their debut, Black Sabbath, was met with astonishment for their style, for how they brought together music and attitude, and they were unlike anything we've seen before. And they brought together different genres, from the Beatles, from the Doors. They brought together jazz. They brought together, covered that or brought it together with an art form of horror movies. And what they did back then, they really created a genre which is valid to this day. People are still influenced by that. Musicians, you might know that. They're still influenced by that. And of course, they had a very charismatic frontman with a lot of drug use. We don't go into that for a second, but what many people, and that is the point, what not many people know is that the guitar player was missing 2 fingertips due to an accident before they founded the band. So he had to play lighter strings and had to play the guitar differently. So that handicap actually caused this very particular sound of Black Sabbath, which made them legendary in the end. And so it is with urban transitions, I would say. We have different bits and pieces. We have different genres. We have innovation, policy, grassroots initiative. And if we blend it all together with all the handicaps there might be in all these sectors, we might get a new genre of urbanism, which is mission-oriented, which I would hope that in 50 years, once we have solved all these challenges, the biodiversity challenge, climate challenge, the socioeconomic challenge, we will look back to this day and think like, wow, what we did back then, that is really inspiring. That is really cool. How did we do that? I don't know. Let's create this new genre of urbanism would be my claim, but it needs to be, you need to listen carefully. You need to listen to the pulse of the cities, what is happening in the cities. You need to have your antennas attuned to the Anthropocene, to the social foundations, to the planetary boundaries. And you need to weave together this kind of policy, urban policy, grassroots initiatives, urban research and innovation into a new kind of urban wisdom, I would call it. So, and you need to do that while ensuring that along the way, along the change, along the curve, people will come out on the other side okay. Even if the uncertainty and the change is as shocking as like Sabbath once was. So thank you so much for your attention. It was very good to have you here. We will be around. Tim will be at the open arena later on. Talk to him. Gerfried and I will be at the circular economy behind the scene session. Great. Thanks. Have a good conference. Thank you, Sampo. Thank you. Thanks.
Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
And any Black Sabbath fans in the room? Huh.
Well, you get
No,
the point, hopefully.
Maybe they're shy. No, but it's been really, really inspiring to get to see indeed these blends of styles. Like even with the shortcomings that we have, we're able to create something, something beautiful and something that drives change and something that is inspiring. So thank you very much, Johannes, for such an energy in this stage, to all the panelists as well for bringing this inspiration on stage. I could not have thought of a better kick off to this event. So thanks a lot for having joined us today.